the woman on the end of the phone said, "Can you tell me when and who they were from?" And when I laughed, she got very upset. And she said, "I think you're not treating me fairly." I said, "Just have a listen to what you're saying. If I knew who they were from and when they came, we wouldn't be having the conversation." It didn't go anywhere.
We got a very humorous and well-written email from Michael Shasky, and I can't do it justice, but I want to read the middle paragraph. Here's because he's talking about the need these days for proof of address with banks. "Here is the pinnacle of nuttiness. I am soon to be old enough to separate my KiwiSaver funds from their usurious grasp, and I am required to provide proof of my address in the form of an actual bank statement. It's the same address they have on file before I can get the money. Fair enough. I don't expect them to pay my funds to someone other than me. So I asked Kiwibank for a physical bank statement to give back to them. The call centre operator said the bank cannot accept its own statements as proof of address. I would need one from another bank. I remonstrated testily. She went off to check and returned to advise that as the Kiwibank KiwiSaver operations are a separate company, they will probably accept Kiwibank's statement for identification purposes. And what email address should she send it out to?" And I thought, it's for confirmation of my address, shouldn't it go to a physical address? So it goes on, this entertaining email. But I want to get David Tripe on, the Professor of Massey's School of Economics and Finance. David, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jim.
Have you noticed this new insistence on the provision of a physical address?
Oh, yes, one gets it in a variety of circumstances. It's sometimes relevant and useful. Sometimes it may be an indication that people have been told that they were required to get various information for anti-money laundering purposes, and they sort of get information without regard to whether it's sensible or not.
Does it make sense for a bank not to accept its own bank statement as sufficient proof of address, do you think?
Well, no. What that suggests is that they actually want people to have an account with some other bank as well. So I don't think that's a very sensible approach to things. No.
No. Well, on the face of it, it didn't seem as if it was. Should we now carry, David, proof of an address with us? Might the need become routine? Because the rest of Michael's email does mention a few examples of that.
So it's probably likely to be relevant for us to have some proof of identity with us. Proof of address is a rather more challenging exercise anyway, because some of the documents that are adduced from time to time as proof of address don't actually seem to be very reliable to me.
Yes, and he was making the point that they were prepared to accept an online version. He was thinking that's not very reliable at all in this day and age of masterful hacking, and he's possibly right about that, isn't he?
I would think he was right, even in the days of prior to masterful hacking. I remember many years ago in my banking days, somebody getting a blank bank statement and using it to type up a corrected bank statement which didn't show the errors that they'd made. So,
I'm sure you could tell us a few stories. Thank you very much, Professor David Tripe. On a day, incidentally, when the Financial Markets Authorities found the conduct and culture of New Zealand's banks to be patchy. Full story on the RNZ website. Miriama Awake, very nice to have your company again.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Matewa. And John Barnett, always nice to see you, John.
Thank you, John.
Have been on the panel today.
Yeah, you too.
And we are back with another panel tomorrow, and Checkpoint is standing very by. Thanks, everybody.
Kia ora, good evening. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly in for John Campbell. Tonight on Checkpoint, the Wally Haumaha saga continues as allegations of bullying by the Deputy Police Commissioner were raised in Parliament this afternoon. Mana in Mahi, the government offers up to $6,000 to employers who hire young beneficiaries as apprentices. Business and tourism operators in Lombok and the outer Gili Islands describe apocalyptic scenes as tourists flee and the death toll climbs. An Indian student appeals her case to Immigration New Zealand after she paid $35,000 to a businessman for a job that never existed. Don Brash prepares to go face-to-face with protesters when he turns up to a debate at Auckland University tonight.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The government has launched an investigation into 3 recent bus crashes involving the same make of bus. The crashes on Mount Ruapehu in Rangatike and in central Taranaki killed 2 people and injured several others. All 3 vehicles involved were Mitsubishi Fusos. The Transport Minister, Phil Twyford, says he's asked the Transport Ministry and the Transport Agency to see if there's any connection between the crashes.
First, tell me whether or not the certificate of fitness testing has been implemented with sufficient rigour. And secondly, I want them to look at all 3 cases and see whether there are any common elements that we can learn from.
Phil Twyford. The school bus that crashed near Inglewood yesterday, killing the driver Alan Campbell, has now been removed. The Police Minister says no formal complaint has been made regarding allegations of bullying by the Deputy Police Commissioner that were the subject of an opposition question in Parliament today. There's already a government inquiry into the process whereby Wali Haumaha was appointed in light of comments he once made defending police officers accused of rape in 2004. Speaking outside the House, Stuart Nash commented on the question asked in Parliament this afternoon by Nationals Deputy Leader Paula Bennett.
I think there's a process around natural justice. These are allegations at this stage. As far as I'm aware, there is no formal complaint of bullying that has been made. Until that has been made, then these are simply just that, allegations.
The Police Minister, Stuart Nash. Former foreign students are being urged to change their work visas to escape exploitation by dodgy employers. From November the 26th, the government is abolishing the 2-year work visa that ties former students to employment with a particular business. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Some people have been using the employer-assisted visa scheme to trap former international students in underpaid jobs and charge them tens of thousands of dollars in exchange for the visa. One victim of the scam told RNZ News she paid a Waikato man $35,000 for her visa, but then found there was no actual job. She's now complained to Immigration New Zealand and is hoping to get a new visa. The Migrant Workers Association says the change should bring a big drop in exploitation, but it warns that dodgy employers are likely to find new ways to work the system. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Indonesia's state news agency says the death toll from the Lombok earthquake is much higher than the official figure. And Tara News Agency puts the number of those killed by Monday's quake at 347. The National Disaster Mitigation Agency says it's standing by its latest figure of 131, despite other government agencies, including the military, reporting a much higher toll. Aid has begun reaching isolated areas of the island as rescuers intensify their efforts to find survivors. The Trump administration is imposing sanctions on Russia over the nerve agent attack on the former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter in Britain. Joining European countries in publicly blaming Moscow for the attack, the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has signed off on a finding that Russia violated international law. This triggers automatic sanctions under a law on chemical weapons. A man convicted today of murdering a 69-year-old man by stomping him to death showed no emotion as the jury's unanimous verdict of guilty was delivered. Gabriel Yad Illahim had only been out of an acute mental health unit for 3 days when the killing happened last September. CCTV footage showed him stomping and striking Michael Mulholland 91 times. In the High Court in Auckland this afternoon, Yad Illahim, who had pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, was remanded to the Mason Clinic. He'll be sentenced next month. People who have eaten eels or fish from a poisoned Taranaki stream are being urged to have their risk assessed. The oil company Shell has admitted contaminating several South Taranaki sites with a firefighting foam containing banned chemicals. The Ministry for Primary Industries has warned people not to eat eels or fish from the Oaunui stream. The region's Medical Officer of Health, Jonathan Jarman, says the risk grows with the level of exposure.
It's the dose that makes the poison, so we need to find out just how many eels people have been eating. Is it something that people do every day or every week or every month?
Jonathan Jarman says a hui for those affected will be held in South Taranaki later this month. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport, the All Blacks assistant coach Ian Foster says it really doesn't matter who's the favourite for next weekend's Rugby Championship opener against Australia. All Blacks coach Steve Hansen raised eyebrows earlier this week when labelling the Wallabies favourites because of their win in the third Bledisloe Cup rubber last year. Asked today about the debate, Foster says it means nothing.
Personally, I think it's irrelevant. All I know is that we've never had an easy game in Sydney. You know, we've had a couple of games in my time that the score's blown out a couple of times, and I've also been on the back of a couple of losses. So, you know, I think that's probably all we need to focus on. You know, they're building and they're pretty energetic about this game, and we need to be as well.
Ian Foster. The coaches of the National Rugby League competition could be set to form their own association. In the same week, Penrith sacked Anthony Griffin with more than 2 years left on his contract. Sydney Roosters' Trent Robinson has revealed plans for a support organisation are underway. Meanwhile, former Kiwis winger Jason Nightingale has announced his retirement from league. This NRL season with the Dragons will be his last. And New Zealand are through to the semi-finals of the Oceania Under-19 Men's Football Championships. The defending champions thumped Tonga 14-0 in Tahiti this afternoon. Qualifications for next year's World Cup in Poland is up for grabs at the tournament. That's the news.
Toxic foam in our rivers.
Shocking. Our communities, they live off the land. They fish whitetail and timber and Kyoto all the time.
Our freedom of speech.
The most effective security that we can provide is the rationality and civility of our debate and discussion. And without that, no amount of police or security will be able to protect us.
Our immigration policy.
This isn't the only policy we plan to implement. I'm not done. I've got a lot more work to do here.
Our stories. Susie Ferguson and Guy Espiner. Morning Report weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the work being done to boost the construction sector by making it easier for Asian companies to do business here and to upskill migrant workers. And after 10, Sam Hunt with a new selection of his work over nearly 5 decades. Coming to it also includes 19 new poems he's written this year. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northern and western areas from Northland to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Remaining showers clearing and becoming fine today. Showers returning to Taranaki and Whanganui tomorrow afternoon. Gisborne, fine. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, also Horowhenua through to Wellington. Fine today. A southerly change spreads north tomorrow afternoon and evening with showers. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine at first, a few showers developing overnight or tomorrow morning, then clearing. Buller, cloudy periods and a few showers. Westland and Fiordland, rain spreading north today with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms, becoming fine everywhere early tomorrow. Otago and Southland, scattered light rain clearing tonight, fine tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, rain possibly heavy tonight, then clearing tomorrow afternoon. It's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Kia ora, good evening. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly in for John Campbell tonight. There are yet more allegations about the inquiry into the appointment of Wally Haumaha as Deputy Police Commissioner, with revelations of bullying of other public servants being made in Parliament. The inquiry has already been fraught with difficulties, including the resignation of its head, Pauline Kingi, is looking into Mr Haumaha's appointment in light of comments he made defending police officers accused of rape in 2004. Here's our political editor Jane Patterson with this afternoon's events.
National has been running a hard line on this inquiry, firstly raising questions about conflicts of interest against the Internal Affairs Minister Tracy Martin, who ordered the inquiry. The inquiry head, Pauline Kingi, then resigned, citing her disappointment at being subjected to political attacks following revelations she had endorsed Mr Haumaha more than 20 times on LinkedIn. In Parliament this afternoon, National's Deputy Leader Paula Bennett wanted to know how the government would respond to the latest claims.
Will the inquiry cover new allegations that have been put today of intimidation by Wally Haumaha to other public servants who were working with him?
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, the inquiry has been set up to look into whether or not all relevant information was available in the appointment of Mr Haumaha. On the face of it, it would appear to me that those allegations fit within that category of the terms of reference.
The allegations relate to women public servants from Corrections and Justice, and Ms Bennett asked the Prime Minister what was happening with those two agencies.
Will she be asking the Chief Executives of Corrections and Justice if they had reports from senior female employees that they wished not to be in the same room as Wally Haumaha?
Mr Speaker, I can assure them, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I can assure the member that we will be following up with the Chief Executives of those agencies on the allegations that have been made.
National is questioning whether it's tenable for Mr Haumaha to stay on as Deputy Police Commissioner. The party's police spokesperson Chris Bishop also zeroed in on the Police Minister Stuart Nash, asking him about his relationship with Mr Haumaha.
Can he confirm that when he captioned his weightlifting video in the parliamentary gym, Penny Henare, Wally and Alf, just calling out those who doubted, the Wally in the caption was a reference to Wally Haumaha?
Mr Speaker, yes.
Mr Nash posted a light-hearted video of himself lifting weights on social media a few months ago and mentioned Mr Haumaha in the caption. Outside the House, Mr Bishop said that raised questions about how well Mr Nash and Mr Haumaha knew each other.
Stuart did that somewhat silly video, which has been so widely mocked, I suspect he regrets doing it, but the reality is it's out there on the public record, him pushing Tim in the gym, and he gives a shout out to Wally Haumaha. You'd have to ask him exactly what that means, and whether or not that was appropriate or wise of Stuart Nash to do that.
Stuart Nash said Mr Haumaha spent a bit of time in the gym, and the video was just a joke between a group of people who were challenging each other about the weight they could lift.
Well, look, I think there's a process around natural justice. These are allegations at this stage. As far as I'm aware, there is no formal complaint of bullying that has been made. Until that has been made, then these are simply just that, allegations.
Stuart Nash says no formal complaint has been laid against Mr Haumaha. When asked by Chris Bishop if he has confidence in the Deputy Commissioner, Mr Nash would just say there's an inquiry underway. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
And the Justice Ministry has just released a statement saying there were issues raised by Ministry employees about the management of the project they were working on at Police HQ from October 2015 to mid-2016. And as a result, the employees returned to Justice for the remainder of the project. It says those issues were raised at the highest level with the acting Chief Executive of the Justice Ministry and a Deputy Commissioner at Police at the time. It says the Ministry expected police to follow up this issue appropriately, and the Department of Corrections says 2 staff were seconded to work on a cross-sector project about improving justice outcomes for Māori. It says 1 staff member initially worked at police headquarters and later worked from the Ministry of Justice, which it says we supported. Corrections goes on to say it has no record of any allegation of bullying being made by either staff member. The first person seconded has not worked for the department since August 2016. During her secondment, her manager was in regular contact with the staff member. The second person, who returned to work at Corrections at the completion of the project, has confirmed that she had no concerns, and the police have not responded to requests for comment from RNZ. To other news now, and employers who take on young beneficiaries as apprentices are to be paid the equivalent of the dole in a bid to get more youth into lifelong work. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern unveiled the scheme dubbed Mana in Mahi, or Strength in Work, at the civil construction firm Downer in Porirua this morning. Our political reporter Craig McCulloch was there.
The Prime Minister's first day out on the road since returning from maternity leave, and bedecked in an orange high-vis safety vest.
It's always striking. There's only one person who suits fluorescent orange.
Jacinda Ardern is here to announce a new scheme to encourage businesses to take on 18 to 24-year-olds who've been on a benefit for at least 6 months. The apprentice will work for 1 year towards a level 4 qualification. The government will pay the employer the equivalent of the dole. The employer will then top that up to pay the young person at least minimum wage.
We as the government are here to support our young people, our rangatahi, into work and the dignity that brings them. Now we're asking employers and business to join us in that. We will support you to support our young people.
Employers will also get between $3,000 and $6,000 for each apprentice to help with costs of paperwork or transport to and from the workplace. The program will begin with a pilot of 150 apprentices and will be funded for up to 4,000 people from next year. The Employment Minister, Willie Jackson, admits that's an aspirational target and he's not sure what the uptake will be.
We're optimistic about this, but it's going to take some time.
The great thing is that, even at the point that we're launching, we've already got employers who are committed to this first stage. So that's fantastic. We just need more of it.
The first 2 employers involved are Wellington Hospitality Group, which owns 25 venues in the capital, and subcontractors of the construction firm Downer New Zealand. Lyle Hedges is a general manager at Downer and says the initiative will be transformative. He tells the tale of a young apprentice who worked a full day's hard labour but then slept in for his shift the next day.
Our supervisor said, we've got to let him go. Our manager said, no, you don't. You go and get him out of bed because he'll be asleep. And make sure that he's got water, make sure that he's got food, and look after him for the day. So the team did that. That particular individual now has gone through his qualifications and he is one of our key talents that has come from youth to work.
Downer foreman Dante Such has been with the company for 7 years. He started out as an apprentice and has now taken on the role of supporting young apprentices.
Definitely makes a difference. Just having someone sort of act like they care, or like someone's caring about you and making that link and making sure you're okay and you're enjoying yourself.
The plan's won tentative support from the National Party, but its employment spokesperson Paula Bennett isn't convinced the government's putting enough support around the apprentices or enough conditions on their placement.
They're underestimating what the cost of it is, how complex some of the work is around it, and that employers are not babysitters, they're trying to run a business.
The scheme begins in October with roughly 40 apprentices. 11% of 15 to 24-year-olds aren't studying or employed, and that rises to 15% for Māori and Pacifica, figures that the government is hoping this scheme will help bring down. Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Craig McCulloch.
To the quake-damaged island of Lombok now, where the scale of devastation is becoming clearer. There are conflicting reports of the death toll. The country's disaster agency puts it at 131, but others say it's as high as 340. 80% of buildings on the island have been destroyed and 165,000 people have been forced from their homes. Aid and disaster agencies are scrambling to provide equipment and supplies. CNN's Amra Walker reports.
Tens of thousands left homeless, many in crowded tents waiting for aid to arrive. On the Indonesian island of Lombok, entire villages lay flattened from 2 earthquakes in 5 days. The survivors are now desperate for supplies, particularly in the most rural areas.
6 families live in our tent. It is very hot during the day and we are drenched with sweat, but it's chilly at night. We need some blankets, and the children also need some cold and cough medicine and milk.
Hospitals work to treat the hundreds injured, but some choose to stay in open-air tents over air-conditioned wards, traumatized and fearful another building could collapse above them.
We can still feel the aftershocks at night, just last night even. That's why we need to stay alert.
Meanwhile, search and rescue efforts double down, but it is slow going. They face obstacles, roadblocks, and a lack of proper excavating equipment. At the Jabal Nur Mosque, a crowd gathers to watch rescuers trying to break up concrete in search for survivors and bodies. A local imam watches the operation, remembering when the first tremor hit in Sunday's quake.
We were praying in the evening together, and during the first quake, we didn't run. We wanted to continue. But after the second quake, we broke our prayers and ran for our lives.
The imam says as many as 200 people were likely in attendance Sunday. It's unclear how many got out alive, or how many are still trapped or crushed below the rubble, including the aunt of a famed local sprinter.
My wife was buried under that mosque, so that's all I'm thinking about and waiting for. Now that the heavy equipment has arrived, I hope we can retrieve the body.
Thousands of tourists have been evacuated from Lombok and 2 surrounding islands, some taking ferries to safer places.
Amber Walker with that report. Meanwhile, businesses and tourism operators in Lombok and the outer Gili Islands have described apocalyptic scenes as tourists flee. Lauren Lavoie, who runs a scuba business on the island of Gili Island, says he's facing bankruptcy, and it could be years before the island recovers as it relies on food, water and electricity supplies from northern Lombok, which has been ruined. Bridget Burke reports.
Sengegi Beach, Lombok. Boats line the beach, waves lap at the shore, the sun shines. It's peak tourist season here. But as the camera spins around, reality sets in. Broken hotel rooms, empty beach stalls, a lone tourist pulls his suitcase towards the jetty. This once bustling resort island of Lombok is now a ghost town. The tourists have fled, fearing further quakes, leaving by plane or by ferry to Bali. For business owners left behind, the future looks bleak. Howard Singleton owns a restaurant called The Office on the beachfront. Miraculously, it escaped major damage with just one collapsed wall.
Tourists seem to have gone in the last couple of days. It's just gone from being high season, August, down to absolutely nothing.
Most hotels, bars, shops and restaurants have closed their doors until the damage can be repaired. But Howard plans to stay open.
I don't expect anything to improve before next year, frankly. It's that bad. I'll try to stay open and I think I can probably survive, but I certainly won't be making any money.
Marcel de Rick runs the Puri Mas Beach Resort. He says most of the damage was caused as the force of the quake rained roof tiles into the hotel's pool and outdoor area.
People are afraid because it is such a world news that Lombok had this strong earthquake, and I'm really afraid that that people are not booking their holiday straight away to Lombok, but instead maybe another destination.
Wendy Wibley and her family are some of the few tourists who've chosen to see out their holiday in Lombok.
I just feel sorry for the people who've lost houses and family. Yeah, it's very sad. And the best thing we can do is, as tourists, is stay here and spend money and help build up the economy again, help build up their wages and that.
Laurent Lavoie, who has lived in Indonesia for the past 20 years, runs a scuba diving business on the island of nearby Gili Island. He described the aftermath of the 6.9 quake as apocalyptic, as if someone had arrived and wiped everyone out.
You go to restaurants and there's still food on the table, rotten by now, and there's still the drinks, and there's still, everything is in place, like people fled or disappeared. It's just like a ghost town, a ghost island. That's what it is.
Laurent's life savings are invested in his business and he plans to stay on Gili Island to protect it. He says even though his building escaped unscathed, the tourists and his income are gone.
It means bankrupt, pretty much. We are fed by Lombok, by North Lombok, meaning electricity comes from North Lombok, water system come from North Lombok. Not all the tourists, many comes from Bali directly with speedboats, but all the food, all the supplies, everything come from North Lombok. I mean, they come from Mataram, come from other places, but via North Lombok. So all those cities over there are completely erased. From the map. Some are really erased from the map, literally. They're just a city of rubbles.
Laurent says the Indonesian army has arrived to protect the island's businesses from looting. He says 72 hours after the quake, the earth continues to shake. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
He stomped a pensioner to death just 3 days after being discharged from Auckland Hospital's mental health unit. But today, the jury dismissed Gabriel Yard Elohim's defence of insanity when they found him guilty of the murder of 69-year-old Michael Mulholland. Yard Elohim had a blank look on his face and stared straight ahead as the verdict was read out. Our reporter Edward Gay has been following the case and he joins me now. Edward, he had a history of mental health.
That's right. He's been discharged. He'd been discharged from Auckland's Hospital's mental health unit, Te Whetu Tāwera, just these 3 days before the killing. They knew he took methamphetamine. There was traces of the Class A drug in the urine sample that he gave during his stay. And the authorities, though, couldn't force him to get help for his drug use. And when the hospital later became full, Yard Elohim was discharged to a community respite centre. And he left. He stayed there, I think, one night. And when he left, he left his medication there. Packets were found. The blister packets were found, and he made his way to Karangahape Road, and pretty much immediately went looking for drugs.
So this case has really come down to what his health was like at the time.
That's right. And essentially, the jury had to decide between two experts. They had the Crown expert psychiatrist on the one side and the defence expert psychiatrist on the other. The Crown psychiatrist, Peter Dean, he acknowledged Yard Elohim's mental health history that includes schizophrenia, but he said Yard Elohim had been ripped off in this drug deal. He'd given a woman $200 to get methamphetamine in this Western Springs area, and the woman basically ran off with his money. And Dr. Dean said despite Yard Elohim's history of mental health, Yard Elohim was feeling betrayed. He was angry that he was ripped off in this drug deal, and that was the basis for this horrific assault, which the CCTV footage that was played to the jury, there's 91 strikes to the body of Mr. Mulholland as he lay on the ground.
But a defence psychiatrist expert disagreed.
That's right. James Kavanagh found it was likely Yard Elohim was hearing voices before the attack and even during the attack. And he said Yard Elohim believed he was a messenger of God. The day after the attack, when he was arrested by the police, he was taken into Auckland Central, just across the road here. And that interview was recorded on DVD. And it shows him at one point during the police interview turning to the corner of the room and lifting up his cup and toasting someone or something in the corner of the room. Nothing's there. And at the end of this recording, the police left the room and Yard Elohim appears to be talking to the spirit of Mr. Mulholland.
But the jury didn't find him insane.
That's right, and basically the Crown's argument that was that Yard Elohim acted out of revenge for being ripped off, and the Crown prosecutor, Kirsten Lummis, she said it was significant Yard Elohim headed straight back to Karangahape Road after the attack to get methamphetamine. As soon as this jury's verdict came down, Yard Elohim is being remanded off to Auckland's secure psychiatric unit, the Mason Clinic. He's due to be sentenced next month. I also spoke to the coroner's office. The coroner obviously looks into unexplained sudden deaths, and the coroner can also make comments and recommendations about a death. And a spokesperson for the coroner, she said a decision on whether or not an inquest into Mr. Mulholland's death is yet to be made.
Thanks very much, Edward. That's our court reporter, Edward Gay. An Indian student is appealing her case to Immigration New Zealand after she paid $35,000 to a businessman for a job that never existed. In the secret recording obtained by RNZ News, the employer can be heard asking for two payments in return for sponsoring the student's work visa. It comes after the government announced significant changes to the student visa system yesterday in a bid to crack down on exploitation. It includes abolishing a 2-year work visa that ties former students to employment with a particular business. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen filed this report.
Nobody knows how many former students have been fleeced by businesses exploiting the employer-assisted work visas, but we do know what it sounds like.
30,000.
30,000?
Yeah.
So what I was told by Deb,
sorry?
It was 20 and 15.
That's an Indian student negotiating to buy a job from a Waikato businessman earlier this year. She secretly recorded the conversation and later told RNZ News she paid $35,000 for a job that never existed. She asked for her money back, but months later has received nothing.
I request you, please give my money back.
Okay,
I don't
so that's
want...
a process for me to get your money back. It'll take 4 weeks to 6 weeks to get your money back.
4
Because it's
weeks.
locked. So our money sits in an investment.
Promise, you can promise with me 4 weeks I can give you. I'm gonna come back after 4 weeks. Please give me my money back. I really need.
The woman says she's now appealed to Immigration New Zealand in the hope of getting a new work visa. It's this sort of situation that's prompted the government to stop issuing employer-assisted visas from November the 26th. People who are still on the 2-year visa at that point can have their employer deleted from the visa, enabling them to work anywhere. Anu Koloti from the Migrant Workers Association says that should stop a lot of the abuse of foreign workers.
In this
should have a huge reduction. To say as far as that it will completely eliminate it, I want to hold off and see what happens in the very near future, because I'm mindful that the exploiting employers can sometimes find other ways to work around the system.
At an international education conference in Wellington today, the Minister of Immigration, Ian Lees-Galloway, says people who are being exploited should alert Immigration New Zealand and seek a new work visa.
We'd want them to bring that to the attention of Immigration New Zealand. That's exactly the kind of exploitative behaviour we need to hear about so that we can stamp it out. And we would also, of course, look at what options are available to people in that situation. One of those options could be to apply for a work visa.
Education agents at the conference, like Vandana Rai, say the government's change will send a positive signal to prospective students overseas.
The work exploitation is another step to just spread the word around that New Zealand is a country which cares about the international students for their well-being, taking every step possible to ensure they are not being exploited, they have the best experience in New Zealand while they study.
Immigration New Zealand approved nearly 11,000 employer-assisted work visas in the 12 months to the end of June, up from 9,700 in the previous 12 months. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Coming up, Fonterra's shares are in trading halt. We'll talk to Nona Peltier about that. Up to 600 students are expected to gather to hear Don Brash speak at Auckland University tonight. Nurseries, cafes and garden stores struggle to keep up with New Zealanders' appetite for avocados. And students at an Auckland primary school win a battle to wear long pants. We'd love your feedback. Don't forget you can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint with John Campbell or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
The inquiry into the appointment of the country's Deputy Police Commissioner may also look at claims of bullying of public servants, which were brought up in Parliament today. The inquiry is looking into how Wally Haumaha was appointed to the job in light of his comments defending police officers accused of rape in 2004. The Justice Ministry says behaviour issues were raised by its staff about the management of a project they were working on at Police HQ nearly 3 years ago, which resulted in the employees returning to justice. The government has ordered an investigation into 3 recent crashes involving Mitsubishi Fuso buses in which 2 people died. The Transport Minister, Phil Twyford, wants to see if there's any connection between the crashes. The inquiry will look at the testing procedure for certificates of fitness and whether there are any other common elements. A working visa change aims to make it easier to former foreign students to walk away from employers who exploit them. The government is abolishing a 2-year work visa which ties former students to a job with a particular employer on November the 26th. The Migrant Workers Association says employers have used the visa to sell jobs to former foreign students and keep them underpaid and overworked. A man convicted today of murdering a 69-year-old by stomping him to death has been remanded to the Mason Clinic. Gabriel Yad Elohim has been out of an acute mental health unit for only 3 days when the killing happened in September last year. Security camera footage showed him stomping on and hitting Michael Mulholland 91 times. Yad Elohim will be sentenced next month. People who have eaten eels or fish from a poisoned Taranaki stream are being urged to have their health risk assessed. The Ministry for Primary Industries has warned people not to eat eels or fish from the Oanui stream, which has been contaminated with a firefighting foam containing banned chemicals. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Kia ora, Katrina. Turning to business now with Nona Peltier. Nona, the Reserve Bank has left the official cash rate at a record low and expects it to be on hold for longer than previously forecast. Why is that?
Well, you know what, this is interesting. We have been looking at an official cash rate of 1.75% for quite a long time. I think it's the 12th time it's been left on hold.
So is that 4 years?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, it's got to be at least
long
3. And it's a good long period. It's not 3. It's a long period though, 12 times. And so what does it mean? Well, we got a new Reserve Bank governor, Adrian Orr, and he thinks that there is economic growth and the inflation is rising. But how, when, we don't know exactly. So has pushed back the idea that rates will change to 2020. which is a long time. We were looking at the end of 2019. That is, a significant difference. Now, he says there are some risks, though, that maybe the economy won't take off, maybe inflation won't rise. And these are because of the surveys we've seen recently. We've talked a lot about the negative business confidence surveys, the negative consumer confidence surveys. And he said if these things come to pass, if people basically don't invest because the confidence is such that they don't, this could really go the other way, in which case our OCR, or the official cash rate, might go down as opposed to up. We don't even know at this stage, and that has unsettled the market significantly. We saw our Kiwi dollar drop more than 1% on the news. So once the market absorbed what the Reserve Bank governor said, it was like, whoa, the Kiwi dropped a little bit, and then it dropped a bit more, and it hit quite a low. So it started out just before the announcement at 67.5 US cents, and just recently, just a little while ago, was at 66.7. So that's a significant fall. At 90.7 Australian before the announcement, and now 89.7. The pence has been holding up at 51.8, but that's more because of what's happening in England and Britain rather than what's been happening here locally. So, interesting. We're probably going to see a little more uncertainty here, and perhaps for on the plus side, people who are looking to borrow money can count on interest rates being low for longer, and it's not a bad thing for exporters either.
So it was quite a surprise for analysts then? I
think so. Was it? I mean, we've seen so many of these surveys, and we have even heard Treasury suggest that perhaps these surveys might translate into lower drop in economic growth, less than what the government is expecting or counting on. So probably not a big surprise. However, never mind, the market hadn't priced that in, so that's why we saw the currency fall. Yeah.
Sure. Fonterra's shares are in trading halt. There's a bit of a question mark over its earnings forecast.
Yes, so the Fonterra surprised us just before midday with an announcement to the market asking for a temporary trading halt. They plan to let us know what's happening tomorrow before the close of business, so that's before 5 o'clock. They're saying that they've basically been working on their annual financial results, so they are going to report their full year result, I guess maybe in September, for the period ending July 31st. And now they're reviewing it. And they've said, well, we're not exactly sure whether our earnings forecasts will match up with what we actually have in the bank. So we'll see what happens with that. But basically, normally when we see a trading halt like that, it's usually material.
It's a downgrade.
It's usually a downgrade. It could be another kind of announcement, but it doesn't seem likely. It would be a huge surprise if it was on the upside, because we've seen in May, Theo Sparings came back and said that he thought that the margins that they were achieving would mean that they wouldn't meet their earlier guidance. Now, they made a guidance just when they announced their interim result. Their interim result was a $348 million loss. They made a loss because they had to take a write-down on Danone. That was a settlement. They also took a very large hit on Beingmate, which is their Chinese investment, $405 million. Now, at that time, I interviewed the chief financial officer, and he thought that that was all the damage that they were going to have to write down. But now, who knows what
Perhaps
it is.
further write-downs.
It could be. It could be anything, but for sure, it's definitely going to hit their bottom line. And, it's been very disappointing. And, of course, now the chair, we know that the chair has left because of ill health. And Theo Sparings has already signaled that he's going to be stepping down. So at the top table there, we're definitely seeing some change in leadership. For shareholders and farmers, there's going to be a lot of, if this is a disappointing markdown, and that is not going to go sit well with their shareholders or the farmers that are counting on this company to deliver for them.
So does the company have to make an announcement before the close of trading tomorrow because it's the end of the week?
Well, they'll have to say something. Whether they say we need more time, we'll come back to you on Monday, they have to say something. They've said they're going to come back to the market before the close of business tomorrow, and so they will. We weren't able to figure out exactly what the situation was. I mean, their underlying profit last year was just over $1 billion. Is it going to be the same? We don't know. I mean, it's a lot of money. This is a big company in New Zealand. It's a cooperative. It's important to our economy. Dairy's a huge income earner. So for this company to underperform in the way that it has over a prolonged period of time, it's going to be a real disappointment.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, you've told us what the dollar is doing, but what about the markets?
Well, the markets didn't do too badly. Yes, we rose nearly 0.8%, 68 points up to 8,940, which was a pretty good day. Now, there wasn't really anything standing out there, but overall, the Asian markets have lifted, and I guess it's because I think maybe could be that the U.S. government has imposed some sanctions on Russia. There's so much global volatility. No one really knows what's happening out there.
Thank you, Nona. Firefighters in Northern California say they are finally making progress battling the state's largest ever wildfire, but still don't expect to have it fully under control for weeks. The blaze north of San Francisco has grown to the size of Los Angeles since it started 2 weeks ago, fueled by dry vegetation, high winds and rugged terrain, and now covering an area of more than 1,200 square kilometres. CBS News' John Blackstone has this update.
More than 4,000 firefighters continue to battle the Mendocino complex fires almost 2 weeks after the blazes began.
So this is one of your lines of defense here.
Yeah, this is a secondary line. For CAL FIRE Battalion Chief Russ Fowler and his team, fighting these fires has been like waging a war.
We're on the battleground and we're trying to make sure our troops stay safe, but we're also trying to save people's lives and property.
This is one place where fire crews have been victorious, cutting a fire break, stopping these flames as they came down this ridge. But they'll need many more of these victories before this fire is out. Crews have been setting up multiple lines of defense, clearing away vegetation to create fire breaks. They're keeping a close eye on where the fire might be spreading.
So our hope is that that plume will collapse back on itself and not bend too much more to our north.
But a plume like that is what's helped this fire grow so much over the past 11 days or so.
A plume like that, and then you add a wind to it, it turns horizontal, and the fire's off and running again.
The unpredictable nature of these fires is why thousands of people have been evacuated. But not everyone has decided to leave their home.
I'm going to stay, and if I think it's going to get to me, then I'll leave, but I don't feel that threatened right now.
The threat to homes here is real. This fire has already destroyed 75 residences, and more than 10,000 structures are still considered threatened. The battle here is far from over. Fire officials don't believe that this fire will be fully contained until September.
John Blackstone reporting from Northern California. Meanwhile, a contingent of New Zealand firefighters and managers have arrived in California to help battle the fires. I spoke to Field Liaison Officer Wipari Henwood earlier today and asked him to describe the weather conditions at his base in Anderson, California.
No clouds in the sky. There's an inversion layer of smoke over the city. And I'd say conservatively, it's about 40 degrees at the moment. The relative humidity is, down in the low teens, so it's extremely dry. And I suppose, in drought conditions here for this time of year. And not only drought, but an extended drought, so they don't envisage getting any rain until sometime in September.
And what are you doing there? What are you and the other New Zealand firefighters doing there?
So currently we've got 35 personnel deployed across California, Oregon, and up into Washington. So all the people that came across this time were sort of like middle management. So just to give you an example, I'm situated here at the Car Fire Camp, just outside Reading. I'm here with a combination of Australian and New Zealand personnel. They are mainly task force leaders, and a task force leader looks after about half a dozen resources. So that could be crews, that could be bulldozers, masticators, and water tankers.
And in terms of the fire and where you are, how close is it? What's it like there?
Okay, so normally fire camps are kept well away from incidents. So the fire camp didn't burn down. So I suppose at the extreme of drive time from this fire camp to the far end of the car fire, it could potentially, because you get into the high mountains and you're on forestry roads, dirt roads, and the like. So to get to the far end, crews could drive for 2.5 hours. So the fire came right into the outskirts of Reading. So 1,000 homes were lost in the township of Reading. And very similar to New Zealand, there are smaller pockets of dwellings out in the countryside, and so it's quite devastating. When on our arrival here into Reading at the local airport, meeting up with the National Forest Service who have brought us over, you could see it on their faces. These people, have been fighting fires for a long time, but, they've got a double whammy this time. They're fighting a massive fire, but they've also been personally affected. Their homes, their families' homes have been lost as well.
And so what is the mood like in Reading with the local people?
Look, for those that were affected, it's devastation. But, for us as visitors, come over here and help them, the gratitude of the local people, it's just unbelievable. You can't walk down even in the fire camp. So this is a massive fire camp. When you're walking around, every firefighter that comes from the United States of America, they all want to stop and shake your hand and thank you for coming along. And it's no different in the township. If you want to, on the odd occasion, on the first day we got here, you stopped for a cup of coffee and nobody would let you pay for a cup of coffee.
Are you feeling like if it's 40% contained, is there a feeling that you're getting on top of it?
No, we're very concerned leading into this weekend's weather event. So, it's there's a big push over the next couple of days before Friday. Today's Wednesday here. So we've got, a day and a half to go to really nail it before this big wind change comes in. So, it's all hands to the deck, a big push.
And what are the fears for this weekend? I mean, what sort of threat is there with this weather change?
So the threat is that, jump the containment lines that we've currently got in place and then races out to the contingency line and then just keeps on going. So, just imagine, so we're at 170,000 acres. The potential is if it shoots out the north and starts spreading, that number will increase rapidly.
And how long are you there for, Wipari?
So we're here for, I suppose, 30 days. So you do 2 rotations of 14 days straight, have 2 days off, and then you do another 14. The day shifts are long, so they're between 12 and 16 hours. So, very long days.
And have you experienced anything like this before?
I suppose, the direct comparison is I was in British Columbia last year, so I have got a bit of experience of what it's like now. But for a lot of the people that came across with me, we've got a combination of experienced people and new people, and we've been trying to help those people and, give them a better understanding of what they're going to face out on the fire line. So, and plus the other thing is we build that capability in our people so we can take all those skills back home.
And that was Field Liaison Officer Wipari Henwood speaking to me from Anderson, California. In breaking news, Lombok has been struck by another strong aftershock, a magnitude 6.2. It's the largest since Sunday's devastating 6.9 quake, and it struck around 15 minutes ago. We'll have more later in the program. To the US now, and is introducing new sanctions against Russia to punish the Kremlin for the country's involvement in the poisoning of former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter in the British town of Salisbury. It's the first time the Trump administration has officially accused the Russians of breaking international law by using the nerve agent Novichok on British soil. Our Washington correspondent Simon Marks reports.
The announcement about the new sanctions came from the State Department, not the White House. Officials say Secretary of State Mike Pompeo signed off on an official finding that the Russian government was behind the use of the nerve agent Novichok last March in the attack on Sergei and Yulia Skripal. It means the Russians have broken laws on chemical and biological weapons use, and that has consequences. Sanctions that could impact millions of dollars of Russian exports of goods deemed to have a national security purpose. They'll be introduced later this month, with Trump supporters like Republican strategist Matt Makiewicz insisting the new moves show that when it comes to Russia, the president means business.
I understand that some of our national allies are probably a little bit frustrated that this decision came as slowly as it did, but it did come, and it is considerable. These are considerable sanctions against the Russian government and against Russian individuals who participated in using this nerve agent. And it's another example of the special relationship the United States and the UK have, given that they're partnered on this and that they are isolating Russia over their behavior.
But is that what is really going on? Upon closer examination, the Trump administration turns out to have been dragging its feet, ignoring a 60-day deadline written into law for US consequences for Russia's use of Novichok on the streets of the UK, and now facing another challenge in 90 days' time. By then, the Russians are required to have provided a guarantee that their use of nerve agents will cease, and also to open some of their facilities to inspectors. If they don't, much heavier US sanctions are required by American law. Meanwhile, in Moscow,
we have agreed and we have invited members of the Foreign Relations Committee of Russia to come to the United States to meet with us in Washington.
Senator Rand Paul, a Republican, carrying a letter of introduction from President Trump recommending him to Russian President Vladimir Putin. And like the US president, certainly not sounding like a man who thinks the Washington-Moscow relationship is in deep trouble.
I think this is incredibly important, and those who believe in either country that we should not have diplomacy are greatly mistaken.
From President Trump himself, there was not one word about the new Russian sanctions, fueling the notion widely shared in Washington that he doesn't really back them. And when he emerges from the seclusion of his holiday in New Jersey, is unlikely to be any more ready to blame the Russian government for the Skripal's poisoning than he was before.
Simon Marks in Washington. The Christchurch City Council is pushing back against a suggestion that control of water networks could be taken off local authorities. This comes as ratepayers fork out millions of dollars to protect the city's drinking water from contamination, even though there has never been any major public health risk. While that work is done, the water is being treated with chlorine, something many in the city think is unnecessary. Logan Church headed down to a council meeting that was looking at the state of the city's water.
Drinking water is now a frequent subject around the council table in Christchurch, and seems to get more problematic with every passing day. The race is on to bring all of the city's wells up to scratch and remove the chlorine it's now adding within a self-imposed 12-month deadline. The council's program manager, Helen Beaumont, admitted this week that the timeframe is now under incredible pressure. But she told councillors today that progress is being made.
So in terms of maximising the delivery of untreated water, we have moved from 5% of the supply, and we expect to have 24% of the supply without chlorine treatment by the end of August.
But discussion was quickly dominated by 4 small paragraphs at the end of Helen Beaumont's 10-page report. It details work being done by the government to see if the delivery of water services could be amalgamated or centralised. In other words, taken away from local councils. Councillor and former Mayor Vicky Buck isn't happy about it.
So bad news, Christchurch ratepayers, because you've got an earthquake and the government promised that they would bring you back up to speed and they forgot to do that. And then you've got an issue of small rural authorities who can't actually deal with this problem And so bad news, Christchurch residents and ratepayers, you get to pay for that as well. Well, no, I'm sorry, that's not okay.
Ms Buck's concerns were quickly echoed around the council table. Councillors spontaneously voting against its ratepayers picking up the cost of fixing water networks in other districts. They were also opposed to being part of a company or authority that would manage such a scheme, which is an option being considered by the government. Deputy Mayor Andrew Turner is worried about the repercussions of such a move.
Once you've created a CCO or some other vehicle, it's very easy under a different set of policies from a government which may not share that view for that CCO then to be subject to privatisation, which would then see control of the water supply further removed from the people.
Vicky Buck says she has asked the Department of Internal Affairs, who is leading the work, to meet the council to discuss their concerns. A spokesperson for the DIA says it is still early days, and high-level options will be put to Cabinet later this year. Aside from water control, some councillors were also worried about the cost of temporary chlorination, originally estimated to be about $600,000. Councillor Sarah Templeton questioned Helen Beaumont over whether that money is being wasted.
But at this point we've had chlorination in some of the pumps for a very short period of time, and the risk actually hadn't changed at all since the paperwork had changed.
That's correct. So temporary chlorination has been an expensive exercise, and there's no evidence that we've got improved public health outcomes from it.
And all the while, the clock keeps ticking on upgrading the city's water network so that it is safe from contamination. There are now only 7 months left before the chlorine is due to be completely turned off. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Call Logan Church Channai.
After weeks of petitioning, children at an Auckland primary school can now wear long pants as part of their uniform. RNZ first reported on some Wairoa primary school students who were freezing during winter because they didn't have trousers as an option back in June. Parents were then told by the Board of Trustees that long pants would be too expensive. But as Jessie Chang reports, it's now had a change of heart.
You're doing very well. It's 3 o'clock and I'm walking with Jamie Travis and her daughter to pick up her son from Wairoa Primary School. So do you normally meet Levi like here?
At the hill, he just walks to the end of the road and meets us at the hill.
Levi isn't wearing the long pants just yet. They've ordered them and they're on their way, but it's clear he's looking forward to their arrival.
What did you think when your mum told you that you can wear long pants now?
I was excited.
Why was it really important for you to be able to wear long pants?
Because I kept being cold at school.
And he's not the only one. Jolene Mostert says she and her sisters are ecstatic they can now wear long pants.
It's better to run with it, because if you run with your skirts, your legs get very cold. But if you have tracksuit or long pants on, you can run a bit faster.
Her mother, Madeline Mostert, says it's great news for her family.
We were very, very excited because there's days that my children doesn't want to come to school because it's too cold. So we are very relieved and very happy.
When Jamie Travis first raised the issue with the Board of Trustees, she was told long pants weren't an option. Not satisfied with the response, she appealed the decision. At the board's last meeting, Ms Travis was then shown samples of what the long pants could look like. And yesterday, parents received official confirmation in the school newsletter that the trousers could now be ordered online.
It could have gone either way, really, with the way I was dealing with the board and the principal, but it turned out really well. The principal and the chairman of the board were really lovely and put everything into perspective. They were dealing with a lot of stuff, so it was not really, they weren't just overlooking the requests from the parents, they were just very, very busy and they got to it as soon as they could.
Ms Travis says she's happy that this has also taught her son Levi to fight for what he believes in. But the chairperson of the Board of Trustees at the primary, Bruce Howard, doesn't expect all children to make the switch. He says the school had track pants as an option in the past, not everyone wore them and there were problems.
They just didn't wear well, the knees wore out on them and looked pretty untidy with children getting around with holes in their pants or patched up pants and whatnot. And there were not popular with a lot of parents because they get wet playing at lunchtimes and then they stay wet.
Bruce Howard confirmed the cost of the long pants was also an issue for the board, but after looking at what other schools were doing and consulting the community, it decided to offer the new long cargo pants as an option. And for Levi and other kids who've been cold, that's all they wanted, to get their long pants before the end of winter. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Jessie Changaho.
Returning now to that breaking news, in the past half hour, a strong 6.2 magnitude quake has hit Indonesia's Lombok Island, causing some buildings to collapse. That's according to witnesses and the Southeast Asian nation's Meteorology and Geophysics Agency. The latest quake was felt strongly on the island and followed a 6.9 quake on Sunday that killed more than 131 people. Injured hundreds of others and left more than 50,000 people homeless. Witnesses told Reuters that the latest quake sent people onto the streets in panic and caused buildings to collapse, and we hope to have more on that after 6. Don't forget, you can get in touch with us. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or Facebook us Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint at radionz, I should say, .co.nz.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The police have confirmed they have received an allegation about behaviour during a joint project with the Justice Ministry run by the unit Wali Haumaha headed, but it was not about bullying. The allegation was raised in Parliament today as an inquiry into Mr Haumaha's appointment as Deputy Police Commissioner continues. The Ministry of Justice has since confirmed issues about behaviour were raised by its staff working on the project with senior members of the Ministry and the police, and it expected the police to follow up. The police say a complaint was laid by someone not directly involved, but when they went back to Justice and the other agency in the project, Corrections, they received no more information and so nothing more was done. Another strong earthquake has hit Indonesia's Lombok Island, causing more buildings to collapse and sending panicked people out into the streets. The shallow 5.9 quake is the biggest aftershock since Sunday's 6.9, which killed at least 130 people and as many as up to 350. Aid has begun reaching isolated areas of the island as rescuers intensify their efforts to find survivors. South Taranaki iwi wants to know how a firefighting foam could still be in use in the region 12 years after it being banned. The oil company Shell has admitted contaminating groundwater at several Taranaki sites with foam containing PFOS chemicals. It only stopped using the foam in March this year. The kai arataki for the Runanga o Ngati Ruanui, Debbie Ngarewa-Packer, says the regulatory system has failed.
The foam that's been used has been banned since 2006. So, again, it brings into question the various entities that we have monitoring our waters.
Debbie Ngarewa-Packer is calling on the Taranaki Regional Council to provide a full audit of where the foam has been used. The Reserve Bank is picking interest rates will remain at record lows for much longer yet. This morning, the bank left the official cash rate at 1.75% for the 12th time in a row and indicated it may now stay there until late 2020. Our economics correspondent Patrick O'Mara reports.
Economic growth has slowed recently, but the Reserve Bank Governor Adrian Orr says it's expected to pick up, while inflation is also rising. But he remains cautious about what the future may bring. Mr Orr says weaker business confidence could undermine firms' hiring and investment plans, harming growth. On the other hand, inflation pressures, which have remained subdued, are rising and might take off. He says the safest course for now is to wait and watch, and the next move could be up or down. Economists agree interest rates are on hold for some time, but most think the bank will start hiking them in late 2019. This is Patrick O'Mara.
A group supporting migrant workers is warning that visa changes might not stop the exploitation of former foreign students. The government is axing a 2-year work visa that ties former students to a particular employer. A spokesperson for the Migrant Workers Association, Anu Kalotti, says removing the link to a specific employer will help reduce abuse.
Initially, it should have a huge reduction. To say as far as that it will completely eliminate it, I want to hold off and see what happens in the very near future. because I'm mindful that the exploiting employers can sometimes find other ways to work around the system.
Anu Kalotti says employer-assisted work visas have featured in most cases of exploitation dealt with by the association. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has chosen the former Chilean President Michelle Bachelet to be the UN's new human rights chief. The General Assembly is due to meet shortly to approve the appointment. Ms Bachelet will replace Jordan's Zayed Ra'ad al-Hussein, who is stepping down at the end of the month after a 4-year term in the Geneva-based job. Nurseries are struggling to keep up with the skyrocketing demand for avocado trees. The Chief Executive of New Zealand Avocados, Jen Schooler, says the number grown in nurseries has jumped from 30,000 to 200,000 in the past 5 years.
Recently, 3 more nurseries have sprung up to service the need for new trees. The 2 large nurseries we've got have done fantastically in terms of increasing their capability. Although saying that, we've had a couple of years where there has been a 2-year waiting list to get trees.
Jen Schooler says while more land is being converted to avocado orchards, more trees are also being planted in existing orchards. It's 5 minutes past 6. Sport. The All Blacks assistant coach Ian Foster says tomorrow night's game of 3 halves in Christchurch will have a bearing on their team for the Rugby World Championship opener. He says the team for next Saturday's clash with the Wallabies in Sydney is not locked in yet.
You know, there's a number of guys that we need to see have a good hit out who haven't played for a little while, so that's one box we've got to tick and see how everyone shapes up after the campaigns they've had and make some assessments over the weekend, really.
Ian Foster. New Zealand's Josh Jr. is chasing gold in the Finn class at the Sailing World Championships in Denmark tonight. The 28-year-old was the overall leader before a storm caused his boats and 8 others to capsize at the start of this morning's final race, leaving him 3rd overall. Regardless of whether his protest to have the race thrown out succeeds, Jr. says tonight's medal race will be hard fought.
The tactics are slightly different. It's a lot smaller fleet, course is a lot shorter, and there's a few things that are important, you know, like the fleet is a lot closer between the 10 boats, so you just got to protect certain areas of the race course a little bit more than you would if you were racing a big fleet.
Josh Jr. And a 58-year-old caddy with the same name as English golfer Tommy Fleetwood plans to return more than $200,000 to the world's number 11 ranked player. The prize money won by Fleetwood for finishing 12th at last month's Open Championship was wrongly sent to his much older namesake in Florida. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, William Dart delves into the music of Bernie Griffin. Lien Huang is on the line from Vietnam, which has another budget airline, Bamboo, to take on the incumbent Vietjet. And something's bugging our changing world.
I was actually able to work with the larvae that Andrew brought back, and we put them, as precious as they were, we immediately put them into cages with these nasty parasitoid wasps to see whether they would get attacked. Some of them had to sacrifice their lives for science.
It's well known that Canada, as well as New Zealand, are quite robust in upholding the norm of international human rights.
Is it standard for a ministry like Canada's Global Affairs Ministry to tweet something like that?
It may not be standard, but we're living in what may be described as a high-intensity communication age. The President of the United States tweets all the time, and I think increasingly it's seen as another form of communication that politicians and diplomats use.
That's Lately with Karen Hay, 10 p.m. weeknights on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northern and western areas from Northland to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Remaining showers clearing and becoming fine today. Showers returning to Taranaki and Whanganui tomorrow afternoon. Gisborne, fine. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Also Horowhenua Kapiti in Wellington, fine today. A southerly change spreads north tomorrow afternoon and evening with showers. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury fine at first, a few showers developing overnight or tomorrow morning, then clearing. Buller, cloudy periods and a few showers. Westland and Fiordland, rain spreading north today with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms, becoming fine everywhere early tomorrow. Otago and Southland, scattered light rain clearing tonight, fine tomorrow, and for the Chatham Islands, rain possibly heavy tonight, then clearing tomorrow afternoon. It's 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
And I'm Sharon Brett Kelly in for John Campbell. Don Brash is for the second time in a week at the centre of what free speech means in New Zealand. Following widespread outrage after his speech at Massey University was cancelled on Tuesday, he's now going to have to face protesters at a debate at Auckland University tonight. The student-run debate, due to start in the next few minutes, asks, has PC culture gone too far to the point of limiting freedom of speech? About 20 protesters have gathered in the past half hour to protest, vowing to disrupt Mr Brash's speech. The Debating Society says he offers valuable insight, while some students say his views on Māori have no place at a university. Zach Fleming has more.
It's anti-hate speech versus pro-free speech.
It's not because of the debate or any of the other speakers, it's because of Don Brash and his racist views.
This is a debate about freedom of speech, not about his involvement in Hobson's pledge or anything like that.
Chris Ryan, the president of Auckland University's Debating Society, says Don Brash was locked in for the Society's freedom of speech debate months ago, to no fanfare.
And then in the course of organising the debate, it's just kind of picked up steam, and now we're here.
Any regrets now that we're here?
No regrets.
Where we are is a national debate about free speech after Massey University on Tuesday cancelled a talk from Don Brash, citing security concerns. That move drew widespread scorn, including from the Prime Minister, and now no fanfare has turned into guaranteed protests outside tonight's debate. Kartusia Balsink will be there with a new university.
His racist views on Te Tiriti, Waitangi and kind of the place of Maori culture within modern-day Aotearoa. We reject that those racist viewpoints have a place on a modern-day university campus.
I think the process of a debate means that to the extent that Don might present ideas that are wrong, they'll be debunked just by virtue of the process of a debate. But I also think it's unlikely that he is going to raise any issues that are problematic. He's spoken extensively in the media about freedom of speech, and this is a debate about freedom of speech.
Overnight, the number of people attending the debate more than doubled, forcing the Debating Society to switch to a much bigger venue. And if the US is anything to go by, this issue of free speech on campuses is only going to get more divisive. Do you reckon Don Brash should be able to speak at the university?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he definitely should. Everyone should have the right to freedom of speech, and if you don't like it, you have the right not to come.
Oh, I'm not going to get into that can of worms, mate.
It's good to get people who don't have the same opinion of you speaking in public places, because that raises, a conversation about the opposing opinion, if that makes sense.
You should be allowed to voice your opinions.
Regardless of what those opinions are.
Of course, that's the whole point of a democracy, isn't it?
I don't see it as particularly controversial. I understand that it has raised a controversy over there, but I think...
That's Sigal Ben Parath, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, who wrote a book titled Free Speech on Campus. She was talking about Don Brash being uninvited from Massey University and says we're making a mountain out of a molehill.
Your higher education sector is quite open and allows for a lot of debate about controversial and other topics. And one event being cancelled or postponed is definitely not a great cause of concern.
But the Free Speech Coalition, which Don Brash is a part of, disagrees. They're threatening legal action against Massey University for cancelling Don Brash's speech.
It seems like using health and safety as an excuse to shut down views that the people in power don't like.
But legal action is unlikely to be a problem here at Auckland University. The Debating Society won't be cancelling the event because the protests held here in the courtyard just outside are expected to be peaceful. Around 600 people are expected to attend tonight. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
People who have eaten eels and freshwater fish from two South Taranaki streams contaminated by firefighting foam are being urged to come forward. Elevated levels of PFOS chemicals have been found in Mahi Kai in the Oaonui and Ngāpiro streams, and the Ministry for Primary Industries has advised people not to gather food from them. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
The oil company Shell has admitted contaminating groundwater at several sites in Taranaki using firefighting foam banned in New Zealand 12 years ago. The company says it only stopped using the foam in March. The Oanui and Naipiro streams are near the Maui production station, and the Oanui is adjacent to its hot fire training facility. MPI has warned people not to eat eels or fish from the Oanui at all, and only once a month from the lesser contaminated Naipiro. The Taranaki Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Jonathan Jarman, says the Regional Council wants to hear from anyone who has been eating eels or fish from the streams.
It is possible that people have been exposed through the consumption of mahinga kai, through eels and freshwater fish, and we, in combination with the Ministry of Primary Industries, we would like to catch up with those people and try to determine their levels of exposure.
PFOS have been on the International Chemical Hazards List since 2009 and were banned here in 2006. The man-made chemicals can last thousands of years and accumulate in the body. Health concerns have been raised worldwide, though the research into their impacts is inconclusive. Dr. Jarman says the risk grows with the level of exposure.
It's the dose that makes the poison, so we need to find out just how many eels people have been eating from one of the streams in particular. Is it something that people do every day or every week or every month? And from that exposure, we'll be able to determine risk.
Dr. Jarman says the DHB, MPI and the Council are taking a precautionary approach, and at this stage there does not appear to be an acute health risk in Taranaki. A spokesperson for Climate Justice Taranaki, Catherine Chung, says the contamination scare doesn't surprise her.
I think they are just a result of the well-known self-regulation practices by the industries. Been going on for so long. The oil industry is known to self-regulate, and also the very poor monitoring and reporting practice of the regulatory authorities.
Kaiarataki for Te Ruranga o Ngāti Ruanui, Debbie Narua-Packer, says her iwi is still trying to get clarity about the situation at the Rimu production station outside of Hawera. She says it's not good enough that waterways are still being polluted in 2018.
Now, we shouldn't be getting surprises like this. We're a first world nation, and we should be able to be assured that the practices going around our waters are safe, and that the life within the waters are safe too. And I think, this is where iwi take quite a strong lead.
Ngāti Ruanui is calling for a full audit of where firefighting foam has been used. On the streets of New Plymouth, there was genuine concern about the foam contamination.
We've got enough issues with our waterways anyway without adding more chemicals to them.
Definitely not a good thing for our ecosystem.
I suppose the problem is it going to be, what's the long-term effect?
I'm just thankful that we have our own water supply.
Definitely concerning, and anything where there's issues environmentally and health-wise for people, it's an issue.
The Taranaki Regional Council says it's considering taking compliance action against Shell and the New Plymouth District Council, which owns the city's airport, where groundwater contamination has also been found. It says its investigation is ongoing. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te ahi pō, ko Robin Martinaho.
Another strong earthquake has hit Indonesia's Lombok island in the past hour, causing more buildings to collapse and sending panicked people out onto the streets. The shallow 6.2 quake is the biggest aftershock since Sunday's 6.9, which killed at least 130 people and possibly as many as 350. Our producer Bridget Burke has just spoken to Laurent Lavoie, who owns a scuba dive business on the nearby island of Gili Aya.
We just got a quake 6.8, like 2 seconds. It lasted a few seconds. I was on my terrace on my porch, so half inside, half outside. I saw my house going left, right, pretty much. But there's still some small tremors. Like just before the cold, we had like a second one, but very light. Today I got 10 quake a day. Roughly, I can feel 10 a day, every day, since the big one. You can feel at least 10 quakes a day, but they're all small. But today, that one was pretty big.
And that's Laurent Lavoie, who owns a scuba dive business on the Indonesian island of Gili Aya. To the US now, where after a series of congressional races, both the Republicans and the Democrats can claim some points on the board. The result in a key Ohio district is too close to call, although the Republicans have already declared victory. The party spent millions defending what should have been a safe seat. Republicans have held it since Ronald Reagan became president in 1981. The Democrats have closed the gap to less than 1%, which they say is an ominous sign for Donald Trump going into the November mid-elections. With more, here's the BBC's Rajini Vaidyanathan.
He's a really hard worker. Troy Balderson, come on up.
Just a few days ago, President Trump was on the campaign trail. It was meant to be an easy win for Republicans, but Tuesday's vote is still too close to call in this Ohio congressional district, which backed Mr. Trump in the presidential race.
Can you believe how close this is? We are in a tie ball game.
Democratic candidate Danny O'Connor's strategy was to get Republicans to switch sides. In some cases, that task was easier.
How are you doing it? I'm engaged to one, first and foremost, I guess. But, you know, we'll go anywhere. We'll talk to anyone about issues that matter.
And to many, the issue that mattered was the presidency of Donald Trump.
I voted for Troy Balderson. I think that he'll support the president's agenda, which I support. And that's basically the reason.
Danny O'Connor.
And why'd you do that?
He is going to bring the change that we need, and he's ready to put some checks and balances on the current president that I think we desperately need.
As ballots were still being counted, the president and Troy Balderson were already claiming victory.
I'd like to thank President Trump.
The fact Democrats have gained ground in Ohio is a worrying sign for Republicans ahead of November's midterm elections, which are the first electoral test of the Trump presidency. Both parties are continuing to select their candidates for those crucial races.
In Kansas, votes are still being counted to decide whether Trump ally Chris Kobach or incumbent Jeff Collier will be the Republican candidate for governor. And in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer won her primary to become the Democratic candidate for governor there.
I'm the eldest of 14.
And Rashida Tlaib won her race in the same state to represent Democrats and looks set to become the first Muslim woman in Congress in a year which has seen a record number of female candidates.
Thank you, my fellow New Yorkers.
But for some of those who already serve, the road to November looks unpredictable. Chris Collins was the first member of Congress to back candidate Trump in 2016. He's now been charged with insider trading. Prosecutors say he called his son during the annual congressional picnic, telling him to sell shares in a pharmaceutical company. He denies the charges and says he'll still fight in the midterms.
Rajini Vaidyanathan with that report. From seed to plate, avocados are in hot demand. Nurseries, cafes and garden stores alike are struggling to keep up with New Zealanders' desire for the fruit. People are having to wait up to 2 years for an avocado tree, and the number of trees being grown in nurseries has jumped from 30,000 to 200,000 in the last 5 years. Miriana Johnson reports.
Smashed avocado on toast or a side of guac are usually on offer at the Flight Coffee Hangar in Wellington. The assistant manager, Louise Metalka, says they quickly sell out.
Sometimes we put like a guacamole special on, for example, and it's like selling out super fast. Yeah, people definitely love the avocado.
But Miss Metalka says the fruit is too expensive, especially in off-season.
Because they're off-season at the moment, we actually had to take them off our menu because we had to charge $12.50 for a side dish of avocado, which was like way too pricey, so we just decided to take them off.
As the weather warms up, Ms Metalka says avocados should be back on the menu soon. Avocado has become a hot commodity, with the police recently arresting 3 people in relation to a spate of avocado thefts in Tauranga. And it's not just there. Thefts have been reported in Te Puke, Welcome Bay, Bethlehem, Te Puna and Katikati. The New Zealand Avocado Chief Executive Jen Schooler says demand doesn't appear to be slowing down.
Recently, 3 more nurseries have sprung up to service the need for new trees. The 2 large nurseries we've got have done fantastically in terms of increasing their capability. Although saying that, we've had a couple of years where there has been a 2-year waiting list to get trees.
Ms. Schooler says more land is being converted to avocado orchards, and existing orchards are also planting more trees. More people are also turning up at garden centres wanting to plant their own avocado trees. King's Plant Barn's e-commerce manager, Billy Aiken, says demand for avocado trees has roughly tripled in the last 3 years.
One of the big things that changed last year was we actually had a new type of avocado come on the market, which is called Cleopatra. It's a dwarf avocado, and it's the first actual dwarf one that's been available, and so last year that was by far our biggest seller, and just the sales for that variety alone were roughly equal to 2015.
But Mr. Aiken warns it can take 2 to 3 years before people can start enjoying their homegrown fruit. And they can't grow everywhere. Jen Schooler says the New Zealand climate isn't ideal.
There's the wonderful dream of having an orchard that's as beautiful as an avocado orchard with its big glossy green leaves and wonderful flowers in the spring and being able to produce this amazing fruit. But there's the realities of being a horticulturalist, where we are very much influenced by weather and climate and soil.
The best areas to grow avocados are in the Northland and Gisborne regions. Ms. Schooler says anyone thinking of growing avocados needs to do their research first. For Checkpoint, Cormediana Johnson, TNA.
The antics of a bouncing South Island sheep have captured worldwide attention after his owner posted a video of the woolly jumper trampolining. More than 2.4 million people have now viewed the Facebook video of 11-month-old Bacon leaping onto a tramp and excitedly jumping around. It's also been shared more than 30,000 times, and the video has appeared on media sites in Australia and the UK. I asked animal behaviourist Mark Vett how unusual it is for animals like Bacon to use a trampoline to exercise.
They actually do like to have a bit of a bounce. They've got a behaviour that we call spronking. You watch them out in the field, when there's a whole flock of them, and they'll all be spronking together. And it's a bit like what deer do, particularly the smaller species of deer when they're in long grass, and you'll also see foxes do it and those kind of species. And it's spronking and they're jumping up, in gay abandon, basically. It's normally a play behaviour, and it makes you feel really good watching it, yeah.
So do you think this particular sheep, Bacon, might be smarter than most, that he's discovered the trampoline to do his spronking on?
Yes, well, I think, it could become something big, couldn't it? You imagine how many million trampolines all we'd need, but it's a lot. I think it's about 100 million, isn't it, at the moment? So, it's cool. They are very coordinated species. They're a bit like goats, particularly when they're that age. And, they're very agile, and they can learn to, bounce on things and ride things, and, they're really, really cool.
Is he doing it for fun? Is he going there because it gives him some joy?
Yeah, it's a play behaviour, that once one starts, the others follow, and they go spronking around. In other species, in different contexts, it can be for different reasons. One is anti-predator behaviour, so you're bouncing above the grass and the trees a bit to be able to see predators coming, and so that's one of the other purposes of it. But so it's pretty useful behaviour that's learned when they're young, and when play is important in their social development.
Because Bacon's not even 1 year old, so would he grow out of it in time, do you think?
He will to some degree, yeah. It's normally a lamb behaviour, it can carry on. But if it's a learned behaviour and he enjoys it, and they continue to reward him, and that might just be social contact. You could actually clicker train him, but that's another story. So you can reinforce that behaviour, and when we're training animals to do things themselves, if we taught him that behaviour, we'd do it through clicker training, and so he'd be clicked and rewarded when he was just after he finished bouncing, and but just social praise and play, and normally they get very bonded, a lamb to humans during the imprint period, and if they get bonded to them, then they want to bounce around with them like their mates, like their other little lambs, and so the kids doing that beside them, they'd love it. Only they're probably more coordinated than the kids.
Yeah, it's gone crazy on social media. It just makes you laugh when you see it. Why is that, do you think? Just because it's a bit of a crazy move?
Well, I mean, I think it's that whole, just that joy of, it's a spring thing, of course, so they normally do it in spring. And so, it's literally, the new season, and the lambs are at that age where they're learning their social behaviour and they're interacting with each other in a group of lambs. And, I mean, it's similar to play in pups, when you see them do the play bow and those kind of things. It's part of their social play behaviour. And as I said, most play behaviour has got to function later in life, and so you're practicing that thing in the context of play. So that's kind of how we learn, how the body learns to coordinate it all together, and how the neurons wire together to make these behaviours. And so they've got to repeat them, so play is a good context for them to develop those behaviours.
That was Dr. Mark Vetty. And if you want to see that delightful video of bacon spronking, you can go to our website or Facebook page. But that's Checkpoint for this evening. Thanks for joining us on your radio, your television, online, or however you chose to connect with us today. You can catch us on our stories tonight on rnz.co.nz/checkpoint or on our Facebook page. And for the latest news, information, feature stories from New Zealand and around the world, go to the rnz.co.nz homepage. John will be back from his sickbed tomorrow. From me, Sharon Brett Kelly, and the fantastic Checkpoint team, have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The police have confirmed they did receive an allegation of bullying relating to a joint project with the Justice Ministry, run by the unit of Wali Haumaha headed. In Parliament today, it was claimed 3 women complained about bullying behaviour by Mr Haumaha, who's now the Deputy Police Commissioner during the project. Another strong earthquake has shaken Lombok just 4 days after a 6.9 tremor killed well over 100 people. It's the third powerful quake to hit the Indonesian island in